So things, I think, immediately, well, not immediately, but things got better for Georgia, obviously, when Kirby Smart was hired. You get that first year where they go 8-5, they win 7 games in the regular season. They go on to win a bowl game, right? Kind of a bowl game that people would consider to be meaningless. But after that, in 2017, things really started getting better. And obviously, they were national championship contenders, right? Very close to winning a national championship in Kirby's second year at Georgia. And part of that was because of the leaders they had on that team. Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Lorenzo Carter, Roquan Smith. They had some serious leadership on the 2017 Georgia Bulldogs team. That Kirby Smart, part of his job, convincing those guys to come back because Georgia would not have been in the position that they would have been in 2017 if it wasn't for having those guys out there. And I think that what's changed for Georgia, what did Kirby Smart really do for Georgia? Well, obviously he recruits on another level than Mark Richt did, right? Obviously he's a very, very smart defensive mind. I think he understands what it takes to run a program, and that's very easy to say when he sat behind Nick Saban for, a bunch of years, right? 6, 7, 8 years, how much time he spent with Nick Saban as Alabama's, head defensive coach. He learned how to run a program. But I think what's taken them to the next level is that culture, the culture of Georgia. It really is something that's obvious. It's obvious how much the Georgia players care about winning for each other. Something that they talked about is kind of not being selfish. I can't remember which game this was after the season, and please stick with me because I've got a few different points here about how Kirby Smart changed the culture, but one of the things I want to circle back to is something that he said after the season, or after one of the games this past year in 2023. He talked about how if you don't care who gets the credit, how much different it can be, how much better things can be. If everyone on the team just doesn't care who gets the credit, then things are going to be really, really good for the Georgia Bulldogs. Success will come easier. So that is one of the mantras they embodied. Obviously, he creates culture with all of the phrases. Eat off the floor. You're a leader, you're not. Better never rests. Right? He comes up with things like that all the time. And you can tell that those players embody it. And who embodies it? The leaders of the Georgia Bulldogs. Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard. Those guys, they talked about eating off the floor. I mean, they literally talked about it. And so I think that the people at Georgia and the leadership and the culture that's been established in Athens and in this football program, I think that is what has been the difference with Kirby Smart. And we got to see a lot of examples of it last year, but over the last 3 years, it's something that they've taken to even another level. Ryan Curley from Dawg was here talking about the culture of Georgia, why I think Kirby Smart has elevated to something that maybe we haven't quite seen it before. But I do think that there have been some other really great culture. Alabama, right? This Alabama's dynasty obviously had it. Real quick newsletter, linking that down below. You don't want to miss out on breaking news. You don't want to miss out on premium stories. You don't want to miss out on free stories that you can click on if you're not a paid subscriber. But all that goes to your inbox every single day. You want an email? When Brian McClendon goes off and heads to the NFL to be the wide receiver coach for the Buccaneers after leaving Georgia, you get a breaking news email from Dawg Post. Things like that happen. So you want an alert and you want to be aware of everything Georgia. Make sure you're signing up for the Dawg Post newsletter. Again, in the description down below. All you got to do is give us your email address if you haven't. And thank you to those who already have. Another point from 2023, the Orange Bowl. I mean, totally different. Part of me felt bad for Mike Norvell. The introductory press conference at the Orange Bowl when Mike Norvell and Kirby Smart were sitting there. And if you maybe recall this one, it was the one where Mike Norvell looked wide awake and Kirby Smart looked like he literally just rolled out of bed. I mean, that's not hate. I mean, Kirby he looked really tired, and people were like, man, is he taking this seriously? Well, it turns out the Georgia football program did take it very seriously, and they wanted to finish what they had started in the 2023 season. They wanted to finish it right. And they felt like losing Alabama the way that they did in the SEC Championship was not finishing it right. Obviously, it's heartbreaking to not be able to have a chance to go play for a national championship when a lot of people think you have a national championship caliber team. But he convinced those guys to actually, he wasn't convincing these guys to play necessarily. The players chose to go play. Kamari Lassiter chose to go play. Kirby Smart essentially advised him not to play in the Orange Bowl. And he talked about that in his Orange Bowl press conference. But that's leadership. You talk about Javon Bullard, they put the culture out there on Instagram, and they show their leadership. Those two guys, Kamari Lassiter and Javon Bullard, were huge, big-time figureheads for this team. All right, Javon Bullard was a guy, he wasn't even really playing against South Carolina because he had hurt his ankle early in the year. And he's in that locker room at halftime. When they're down, 10 points to the Gamecocks in September at home in Athens, and you get that SEC Inside feature that they did, and they show what the locker room was like at halftime, you saw the leader step up and talk, and Javon Bullard was one of those guys. So the culture has changed. Florida State, right, that was an example of there not being a culture there, or there at least being a different type of one, when all of those guys decide, this was a heartbreaking way to end the season, blah, 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 we're not going to play. So that was the difference in the Orange Bowl. Captains. I want to make another point, and this was something Kirby talked about after the Orange Bowl. We're talking about Cedric Van Pran, and I might want to, I might recycle this quote in another video soon because I want to talk about Cedric Van Pran, but if you're not going to watch this video, I want you to listen to this one. This is what he had to say about Cedric Van Pran. A leader for Georgia who was at SEC Media Days as a sophomore, as a junior, 44 consecutive starts for Georgia. Kirby said, yeah, that's hard to do. 44th start is incredible in this league. The amount of physicality on the offensive line and defensive lines in our league is brutal. And he stayed healthy. He's competed. Probably one of the best leaders I've been around. And here's where it gets to my point about this and the reason why I'm bringing it up. Listen to this next paragraph. He got the most votes for captain, talking about Cedric Van Pran, but not as many as some of our other years. We've had guys really get an outlandish number of votes. Aziz, Ojulari, Nakobe Dean. What was amazing was how consistent Ced has been a leader. He doesn't really care about what you think about him. He'll say anything he wants to the team, and he doesn't care about what anybody in that room thinks of him. That's the kind of way the center's got to be. It's got to be a little bit of an asshole, and he's not afraid to do that. But let's go back to where he talked about the number of votes. And in this transcript that I'm reading, it doesn't include a little bit of what Kirby said because I'm going off of memory. But he talked about how so many guys this past year got votes to be a captain, that it wasn't just like 2 or 3 people dominating. Yes, there were 2 or 3 leaders, but they are getting record numbers each year when they do their captain votes at the beginning of the year. And that's because there's so many players on the team that they feel can be a leader. And so, yes, a culture has been established at Georgia, and they want all sorts of players like that to be on their team. In recruiting, yes, Kirby and his staff are obviously going after elite talent and the best of the best across the country. But they want to couple that with leadership, with culture, with being a young man that can be mature. If you're not going to do that, they're cool with you walking. So that is what the culture is at Georgia. Not everyone matches it. And it goes back to what Kirby said after I believe it was the Tennessee game, but it was one of the games where they played really, really well during that SEC stretch. And he said, it just summed it up when he said it, when you don't care about who gets the credit. And I think he was talking about Dylan Bell, but I couldn't find that clip that I wanted to find. But the captain thing really surprised me, how so many guys got voted for it. And that's because they have a bunch of players. Think about it. I could list players that were really considered leaders, not just by myself, but like actually legitimately by the team. You can go through the quotes and find evidence, but Cedric Van Pran, Brock Bowers in a way, Carson Beck in a way, right? Those guys were quieter leaders, but they were considered big-time leaders on this team. Kendall Milton, Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard, Malachi Starks, Tate Ratledge, Nazir Stackhouse. All these guys are considered leaders. Smile Mondin, and a guy that's going to be a leader again in 2024. So they're stacking the roster with young men that they feel like can essentially be an enforcer as well. And then my last point about this, those school sessions that they did about that they've been doing, the things that they do outside of football, learning about each other, really becoming brothers. There's a huge emphasis on team chemistry at Georgia. And I'm not saying that some of these things don't happen at other places, but I'm talking about how big of an emphasis this has been and how Georgia's program's culture has just absolutely skyrocketed. And I think it has especially skyrocketed in the last 3 seasons where they were either the championship winner or a huge championship contender. But I think that the culture at Georgia has been the biggest difference. Thank you for watching. The links are down below for the newsletter and for EcoPoly.